Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I need to tell you something most people won't say out loud. Not every battle in your family is just emotional, financial, or relational. Some are spiritual. Some are demonic. Yes, even in family, we tend to think of demons as creatures from horror movies or some myth cooked up to scare people. But the truth is, they often come dressed as confusion, division, manipulation, and generational curses. They don't need to possess you to destroy you. They just need access. If you examine the history of your family and notice patterns, cycles that keep repeating across generations, you need to understand something deeper may be at work. It's not just coincidence when you see alcoholism in the grandfather, then in the father, then in the son. It's not just unfortunate when divorce follows every marriage, or when depression, abuse, poverty, or abandonment show up again and again like clockwork. That's not just dysfunction, it's a stronghold, it's a spiritual cycle, and wherever there's a stronghold, there's often a spiritual force behind it. Demons operate best in patterns. They hide in the familiar. They don't always announce themselves with dramatic possession or violent behavior. Sometimes they simply whisper lies through generations. You'll never be more than your father. This is just how our family is, and nobody in this bloodline ever stays married. These lies become beliefs, and those beliefs become behaviors. That's how bondage is passed down, not just through DNA, but through agreement. Every generation that accepts the pattern without questioning it continues the cycle. The enemy is subtle. He knows he doesn't have to destroy a person instantly. He just has to plant a seed in one generation and water it with pain until it becomes a tree of destruction in the next. That's why you see families where the same kind of trauma happens again and again. A grandmother abused as a child, her daughter ends up in an abusive relationship, and her granddaughter lives with the same pain. Unless someone wakes up and says, "This stops with me," the enemy keeps repeating the play. But here's the truth that needs to be spoken. What has been tolerated in your bloodline can be terminated in your lifetime. You are not bound to repeat what your ancestors struggled with. God did not create you to relive pain. He created you to break the chain. But you can't break what you won't confront, and you won't confront what you keep normalizing. Take an honest look. What patterns exist in your family that are not aligned with the peace, freedom, and life God promises? What struggles have lasted longer than they should? The moment you recognize a cycle is the moment you can begin to dismantle it, but not in your own strength. Spiritual cycles require spiritual authority. Prayer, fasting, speaking truth, and most of all, refusing to agree with the lie that this is just how we are. You're not just a member of your family. You are a spiritual gatekeeper for your bloodline. The choices you make in your walk with God can shift the course of generations. You're not here to keep the family pattern. You're here to break it. You're not here to suffer quietly. You're here to war silently in prayer and boldly in faith. And when you recognize the pattern, don't just weep over it. Stand against it, because demons tremble not when you notice them, but when you fight back with truth. When manipulation disguises itself as love within a family, it becomes one of the most deceptive forms of demonic influence. It doesn't come with horns or a scream. It comes with a soft tone, a familiar voice, and a sense of guilt that slowly eats away at your peace. This kind of manipulation is not about care, it's about control. And wherever control operates in place of true love, something spiritual is out of order. In some families, manipulation is normalized. It's passed off as how we communicate, or just how mom is, or how uncle always talks. But manipulation is a counterfeit of love. Real love gives freedom. It doesn't demand loyalty through pressure. It doesn't threaten your peace to get its way. When someone constantly uses your past against you, reminds you of everything they've done for you, or weaponizes silence to punish you, they're not just being difficult, they're being used, and spiritual darkness loves to operate in those subtle, unspoken power dynamics. Think of how Satan manipulated Eve in the garden. He didn't come with fire, he came with questions, with distorted truth. That's what manipulation does. It twists reality just enough to make you doubt yourself. In families, this often looks like a parent who oversteps your boundaries and then calls it love, or a sibling who emotionally blackmails you but says, "I'm just being honest." You end up confused, exhausted, and spiritually drained, not because you don't love them, but because something about the relationship is no longer healthy. Demons don't always need a loud entry point. Sometimes they walk in on the path paved by codependency, fear, and unspoken trauma. And once they're there, they sit in conversations, they shape atmospheres, and they silence truth. You start walking on eggshells, avoiding confrontation, suppressing your convictions to keep the peace. But it's not peace if it's built on fear. That's a prison, and prisons built by manipulation are some of the hardest to see because the bars look like affection. This is why discernment is so critical. You must ask yourself, is this love or is this control? Am I being supported or am I being spiritually subdued? Love doesn't need to control, it leads, it sacrifices, it sets people free. When someone truly loves you, they want God's will for you, even if it means you make decisions they don't agree with. Spotting this demonic influence means paying attention to the fruit. Does this relationship bear peace or confusion? Joy or guilt, honor or control? If the fruit is toxic, the root needs confronting, and yes, it takes courage, it takes boundaries, it takes prayer, but most of all, it takes truth, spoken in love, covered in wisdom, backed by spiritual authority. You are not called to live under emotional bondage. You are called to walk in freedom. And when you see manipulation for what it is, don't just name it. Claim back your peace, speak truth, set boundaries. And pray that every spirit hiding behind false love is exposed and defeated. The disruption of peace in a family is not always just emotional instability or bad communication. It can be a sign of a deeper spiritual disturbance. Peace isn't just a feeling, it's a spiritual atmosphere. And when that atmosphere is constantly under attack, when your home feels heavy, arguments erupt for no clear reason, or people carry an unexplainable tension, that's not just a bad mood. That could be spiritual warfare. Demons are drawn to chaos. They thrive in environments where confusion and division reign. In fact, one of their oldest strategies is to disrupt unity, especially within the family unit, because the family is God's design for strength, identity, and love. So when the peace in your home is constantly being disturbed, it's not enough to just ask, what's wrong with them? You need to ask, what spirit is trying to operate here? You might notice this kind of disruption in the form of sudden arguments that escalate quickly. Something small is said, and within minutes, it turns into a major conflict that leaves everyone emotionally wrecked. Or maybe every time you try to gather together, something goes wrong. Someone storms out, the mood shifts, or conversations are laced with sarcasm, anger, or passive aggression. That's not coincidence. That's an atmosphere under spiritual pressure. Sometimes you'll walk into your home and just feel it. Heaviness, anxiety, unease. You can't explain it, but you know something is off. That's not just emotional sensitivity. It could be discernment, because when peace is consistently absent, you are likely dealing with an open door the enemy is using to gain access. That door might be unresolved bitterness, unforgiveness, unrepented sin, or even something as simple as spiritual neglect, when prayer is absent and truth is no longer spoken. Darkness doesn't need a dramatic invitation. It just needs neglect. The longer you allow chaos to rule without confronting its source, the deeper the stronghold becomes. But here's the good news. Peace is not just a hope, it's a weapon. The Bible says the God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. That means peace isn't passive, it's powerful, and reclaiming it starts by identifying what's disrupting it. Ask yourself, what spirits are being entertained in this house? Is there constant complaining, criticizing, lying, blaming, or shouting? Is someone always stirring drama or spreading negativity? If so, you don't just need a conversation, you need a confrontation in prayer. You need to spiritually cleanse the atmosphere and declare that your home belongs to God, not to confusion or conflict. Restoring peace may require you to set boundaries, pray consistently, play worship, fast, and cut off spiritual access points. But most importantly, it requires you to stand firm, because when peace rules your home, the enemy has no room to operate. And when the Prince of Peace is enthroned in your atmosphere, every demon has to flee. Peace isn't just comfort, it's your spiritual covering. Fight to protect it. Resistance to prayer and truth is one of the clearest signs that something demonic may be at work in a family. You see, demons aren't afraid of family traditions or good intentions. They're terrified of truth and prayer, because prayer brings heaven into the room, and truth exposes every lie they've been hiding behind. When you start to speak truth in your home and push back with prayer, don't be surprised when resistance rises. That's not random. That's spiritual warfare. Have you ever tried to pray or bring up something godly in a conversation, and suddenly the atmosphere shifts? Someone rolls their eyes, changes the subject, or even gets angry. You're met with sarcasm, tension, or hostility, not because you said something offensive, but because you spoke truth. That's not just discomfort, it's spiritual agitation. The spirit operating behind the scenes is being exposed, and it's fighting to keep control. Resistance also shows up as distraction. Maybe every time you sit down to pray in your home, the phone rings. The kids start fighting. You get unusually tired or mentally foggy. That's not always just coincidence or fatigue. Darkness resists light, and every time you try to move forward spiritually, the enemy will try to dull your focus, stir confusion, or shut down your motivation. He knows the power that gets released when a family begins to pray and align with truth. In many families, you'll also find a deep unwillingness to talk about certain topics, especially things like generational sin, abuse, unforgiveness, or spiritual roots of dysfunction. These conversations get labeled too heavy or just in the past, and people will avoid them at all costs. That's not always about discomfort. It's often about demonic preservation, because as long as the truth stays buried, the enemy gets to stay hidden. Demons don't mind being in a Christian household as long as no one confronts them. But the moment truth is spoken, light floods the darkness. This is why it's so important to push past the resistance. Don't retreat when prayer gets hard. Press in deeper. Don't go silent when truth stirs conflict. Stand in love and speak anyway. Truth isn't always comfortable, but it's always freeing. And prayer isn't always easy, but it's always effective. The enemy knows this, and that's why resistance increases as you grow bolder. You are the spiritual thermostat in your house. If you lower your temperature because of resistance, the atmosphere stays cold. But if you keep the fire burning through prayer and truth, everything not of God will eventually get uncomfortable and leave. Yes, it may cost you comfort, it may cause tension at first, but you are not fighting people. You are confronting powers that want to keep your family bound. Keep speaking truth, keep praying, keep worshiping, even when the room feels heavy, because every act of resistance you face is confirmation that you're hitting something real. And when you stand in truth, the enemy cannot stand against you. Sudden shifts in behavior and emotion within a family member, especially when they are extreme, unexplainable, or completely out of character, can be more than just stress, trauma, or personality change. Sometimes it's spiritual. Sometimes what you're witnessing is not just a human reaction, but a demonic influence working through emotions to bring destruction, division, or even despair. The enemy is a master of disguise. He doesn't always show up in obvious, violent ways. More often, he works subtly, riding on the waves of human emotion. One moment, someone in your family is joyful, peaceful, and present. The next, they're consumed with rage, bitterness, cold detachment, or dark depression, and they can't even explain why. That kind of drastic change, especially when it lingers or keeps repeating, should raise spiritual alarms. Demons look for access points, and one of the quickest ways in is through emotional wounds, unforgiveness, rejection, trauma, fear. If those wounds go untreated, they become doors, and once the door is open, the influence can take root. That's why someone can seem fine on the outside, but be battling something deep, unseen, and tormenting on the inside. What seems like a mood swing could be spiritual torment. What appears as sudden rebellion could be an attack on their identity. You might see this in the form of someone suddenly turning away from God, becoming hostile toward prayer, church, or anything spiritual. Or they begin isolating themselves, withdrawing from the family, or showing signs of shame, anger, or hopelessness. You try to talk to them, but there's a wall. They might lash out for no reason, or speak in ways that don't even sound like them. That's when you have to remember, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. You're not dealing with the person, you're dealing with something influencing them. This doesn't mean every emotional struggle is demonic, but when the shift is intense, unexplainable, and spiritually destructive, it's time to discern. Is this just pain, or is there something pushing the pain deeper? Is this a mental health battle, or has a spirit found a foothold? You need wisdom and spiritual sensitivity to know the difference, and most importantly, you need to be armed with prayer, not just opinions. The worst thing you can do is respond in the flesh. When you argue with the spirit, you empower it, but when you pray against it, you silence it. This is where your authority matters. Instead of attacking the person, go to war in the spirit. Declare peace over their mind. Pray healing over their heart. Cancel the assignment of confusion, depression, and torment. Fast if you need to. Anoint their room if you have to. But don't just watch the shift confront it spiritually. And remember, sudden darkness is often a sign that breakthrough is near. The enemy fights hardest when he's about to lose control. So when the behavior gets worse, you don't retreat, you press in. Because the power in you is greater than what's attacking them. Isolation and division are some of the enemy's oldest and most effective weapons, especially inside families. What begins as small disagreements, emotional distance, or busyness can gradually grow into full-blown disconnection, silence, and estrangement. And while it may look like a personality conflict or a season of tension, there's often something spiritual working underneath it. Demons thrive in separation because isolation weakens people, and a divided family loses its power. From the very beginning, Satan's strategy was to isolate. In the garden, he waited until Eve was alone to deceive her. Even in nature, predators look for the one that strays from the herd. Why? Because the isolated are vulnerable. The same principle applies in family. The moment communication begins to shut down, when trust starts to erode, and members begin to drift apart emotionally or spiritually. That's when the enemy begins to dig deeper roots of resentment, misunderstanding, and pride. In many homes, division creeps in slowly, a disagreement that was never resolved, a wound that was never addressed, a growing resentment that was never spoken out loud. Over time, walls go up. People stop talking. Or if they talk, it's only surface level. Parents don't know how to connect with their children anymore. Siblings become strangers. Spouses sleep under the same roof but live like roommates. It's not just dysfunction. It's a sign that something has stolen the unity God intended. Demons don't need to destroy your house with fire. They just need to dismantle your connection, because a united family is powerful. When people pray together, love each other deeply, and protect one another spiritually, the enemy has no entry point. But when there's division, he finds space to manipulate emotions, distort motives, and keep everyone stuck in pride and pain. He convinces one person they're right, another that they're misunderstood, and another that nothing will ever change. That's not just disagreement, that's a demonic echo chamber. You may hear thoughts like, "They don't care about you. Why should you apologize first? You're better off without them." These are not just thoughts, they're spiritual suggestions. And if those voices go unchecked, they begin to control decisions, create distance, and fracture relationships that God meant to be whole. But here's the truth. Reconciliation is spiritual warfare. Humility is warfare. Unity is warfare. The enemy flees where forgiveness reigns. You don't fight division with more silence. You fight it with bold love, with honest conversations, with prayer that breaks pride and heals hearts. If you've noticed that your family is no longer emotionally connected, that communication is cold or non-existent, or that everyone is spiritually disconnected from each other, it's not too late. But someone has to go first. Someone has to step into the gap and say, "This ends here," not by forcing everyone to change, but by changing the spiritual temperature through prayer, love, and truth. Isolation may be the devil's weapon, but connection is God's design. And unity, even when it's messy and imperfect, is stronger than any scheme the enemy can launch. Keep fighting for your family, not with anger, but with intercession, not with blame, but with grace, because when families come back together, demons lose ground.